Barrie.
Welcome to Educate, Inform, and Challenge. My name is Teresa MacLennan, and I'm the Executive Director of the Women and Children's Shelter of Barrie. The goal of our program is to talk about the lives and experiences of women. We talk about gender-based violence, gender equity, women in leadership, and where decisions are being made. We're very thankful that you've joined us today. And before we begin, we would like to recognize and thank our Indigenous elders, community, and partners. Thank you for allowing us to share in this space, to have these open dialogue conversations. We thank you for this wonderful inheritance and legacy where you allow us to take part. We are very excited today. We have a wonderful guest, and there's so many ways that I can describe our guest today, but I'm actually going to welcome Ann-Marie. And Ann-Marie, maybe you could tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and all the multiple hats that you wear.
Oh, thank you, Teresa. My pleasure to be with you today, and thank you for hosting me. I currently sit as the Ward 3 City of Barrie Councillor. And in addition to that great privilege, I also have the opportunity to sit around 14 different community tables. The Women's Advocacy Council being one of them, our Board of Public Health being another, and I'm the current chair of the Alzheimer's Society, Simcoe County. And wearing those hats allows me to be part of really great dialogue, decision-making, and conversations. And then on my spare time, I also have the joy of volunteering at our COVID vaccine clinics, and I'm volunteering to support food security awareness of some of our community gardens, and have been enjoying working with volunteers in the garden during the spring season, and giving back to community where I can.
It's such an incredible journey. You know, I think it would be really interesting for our viewers to learn more about. You wear so many hats, Ann-Marie. I did not know that you sat at 14 tables. And what I love about that is that you are a woman of influence who uses her voice at multiple tables to make change happen. So when we think about, if you circle back to yourself as a young girl and thinking about what your life was going to look like, if we even focus on the municipal politics, did you have this vision and goal for yourself at a young age?
Oh, wow. Never. And looking back, municipal politics, who was representing us at a municipal level never really came up. I'm from a small town in southwestern Ontario, and so, you know, neighbors were neighbors, and I, even thinking back, don't recall even seeing lawn signs during an election. Typically, it was provincial or federal focused, and we would be having conversations about what was happening in our community at the hockey rink, or in school, or at some of our community events, or at the Ball Diamond, or at the dinner table on Sunday nights. But never once looking back did I actually tangibly see or discuss municipal service or decisions that were made that affect my life and my family's life.
I have lived in Barrie my entire life, 50 plus years. And in terms of municipal politics, who I remember was Mayor Janice Laking. And she was the first woman who I myself recognized in that forum, and was an incredible shaper of our community that we live in today. So when you think about where you are in your life right now, when did it change for you to think municipal politics might be something where I think I can lend my voice?
Looking back, you know, I've had a lot of experience in the health system. And over the last almost 20 years in different roles, I've had mentors who are strong women working in health leadership roles that might have been a bit atypical at the time, and were mentors, were role models. I thought were trailblazers around changing the conversations to things around health literacy and food security and stable income, and, you know, secure employment for women. And I think it was more so looking back through the health system around being a caregiver, balancing those dynamics of supporting a family, maybe having a full-time job as well, taking care of parents and grandparents. I worked a lot with individuals from a patient and caregiver experience, and did a lot of work to include their voice in changing policies to improve access to health services. And I think that's where I got more inspired about where we can do better, but also, for the most part, I was working with women in the health field, women at the front line. My mom's a nurse, my dad's a teacher. And often, I was starting to see that shift from women at the front line, perhaps maybe more as nurses, PSWs, into CEO positions, into regional leadership positions. And I was working with Cancer Care Ontario at one point with a female leader. Jean Trimnell in our region was the first CEO of the North Simcoe Muskoka Local Health Integration Network. And I was one of the first staff there. And we've seen really strong leadership in health. And I think that's carried me forward into wanting to see that reflected into municipal service.
It is such an incredible journey. And, I think I want to dive in a little bit more and just talk to you about this journey really for yourself, but all women, because I think it is an interesting story about women who have typically been in caregiver roles, nurses, home care, PSWs, right? And do it so well. And how that has moved women from, and using those transferable skills into positions of leadership. Mm-hmm. But we've done a lot of work to be able to get to this place. And so can you talk about maybe your own personal barriers that you had to overcome? And then perhaps let's talk about some of the systemic barriers that you had to overcome. But personally, what did that look like for you in the self-talk that you needed to do with yourself to get to this place?
And I pride myself on being a strong, independent woman, right? But there's always that negative self-doubt, self-talk. Have I done enough? I have a broad education. I have broad work experience. And I was still hesitating to say, but I've never been on a council committee. I am not a planner. How much of this work, needs to have a particular skill set? Will I do well enough by the people, that trust me to carry out the job? And there's pressure that comes with that. And I have high expectations of myself. And so, if I'm going to offer myself into a role, I want to feel, pretty good at being able to say, you can trust that I can do well by you. I can represent the city well. I don't take municipal service lightly. And so there is that teeter-totter of getting involved rather than, complaining and saying, if I've got, I need to get more involved because I'm not finding a way to have my voice heard, or I've got concerns and I'm also inspired around some changes, but I also want to be part of it. And I want to challenge myself and see if I can help move us in a positive direction around how our city is designed, how people love Barrie, their enjoyment about where they live, but also wellness. And so I took that lens, and it took a while, and I'm very fortunate that I have a very supportive network. And I recognize, I came from a place of being in a privileged position. I was able to put a budget aside. I was able to carve out time to campaign. And looking back, when I ran in the 2018 election, the more I kind of warmed up to that idea and threw myself in there, the more people then started to support me. And so it wasn't such a crazy idea. It was, I kind of had to test it out a little bit, but the biggest piece really was, can I do a good job? Do I think that I can do a good job? And I don't know what that job entails. It's actually kind of this very interesting, vague, I can read all the policies and bylaws and legislation, but the dynamics of how the city operates and the role of council, is dynamic, and it's not a simple, it's not a simple system.
So, and we're gonna dive into a little bit about those systems, and I think it is just really important what you've talked about, because what I hear is taking risk. And for women to feel that how we are women, how we go about using our voice is good. Because there can be a sense of conforming to the old way of doing things that typically has been dominated and represented by men. So how can we as women embrace our voice and as individuals and use that voice and not worry if it's going to be the same to what we have historically have? And that risk and finding it from within, the courage and the bravery to do it and be okay with how that rolls out, I think is incredible. And I think that that's what you've done. So I do want to talk about then the systems that you faced. And, women have made incredible gains, and that movement is still happening. But we do face, of course, the internal personal barriers that have been ingrained in us. But then, of course, there are systems around us that we have to still try and take those walls down. So when we come right back, we are going to dive in deeper with our wonderful guest, Ann-Marie. We're going to talk about those systems, but we're going to talk about how we encourage and have more women at the table. And if the table isn't big enough, how do we build a bigger table so that we have more women there? Stay with us. We will be right back. Welcome back to Educate, Inform, and Challenge. We are having a great discussion with Ann-Marie Kungl, who is the Ward 3 City of Barrie Councillor. And we are talking about women in leadership and having opportunities where decisions are being made. We've been talking about some of the personal barriers that women overcome, that women find their voice and use their voice. But we know that there are still systemic barriers that women can face that they are trying. We've tried for years in history, making good gains, but we still have work to do. Ann-Marie, welcome back. And can you talk to us about some of the systemic barriers that you found you needed to overcome or change people's thinking?
Yes, I think so. And I do want to also recognize, I'm coming from a really privileged position when I started my interest in running for council. There were times that I felt I was dismissed, or my ideas were dismissed because of if I appeared useful, then my education or experience was questioned, or even presenting myself in a way that wasn't aligned to being backed by a provincial party, was dismissed about whether or not I was a politician and could do the job. And so I think there are ways in which sometimes there are stereotypes about who fits the mold of an elected official. And when they show up at the door, even questions about that I received where the value is placed, as a first impression. And those are the times where it's a really quick conversation and people are kind of trying to engage with you, but they're also making decisions about you in that moment. So there are times where I was asked, do you have children? And when I shared that I, am a married woman with no children, that worked in and against my favor. And people were very open about that, to say, I love that you don't have kids because you might have more time to represent me and be present. And I want you to be a full-time representative. Others then said, you can't relate to me and my needs or the things I care about in the city if you can't relate to being a mother. And so there are opinions that generally show up about how we think about, relatability or representation, and how do we instill the confidence, my confidence, and how do I relate my confidence and my commitment to individuals that might have different values? And if I don't fit into that value structure, how much can I change their minds? Yeah.
How do you think people's views then about what our city councillors, what the picture of that looks like? What do you think in their mind that used to look like and should have looked like, but how that is changing and looking now?
I think it is changing, and it's quite exciting. So I also get positive feedback to say, it's nice to see that you're interested, and people don't expect me to kind of wait for my turn until I'm retired or I'm of retirement age, right? And so I also ran in 2018, didn't win, ran again in 2020 in the by-election. And it was amazing in those 2 years between both campaigns, how much people paid attention, and I didn't realize it. So it's also making sure that, everyone has an opinion. And I think it's around working with the best of intention and engaging in conversation where there's differences, and that's okay. But I think we're also seeing that there is a strong appetite, and women are getting vocal, and they are thinking about running. They're showing up to run. They are supporting campaigns. They are making delegations to city council. Voices are showing up in so many different ways. The conversations are shifting, right? So we're talking about food security. We're talking about living wage. We're also talking a bit about affordable housing and what does living well look like? And women have a lot to say about that. And so I think now it's becoming less about what has been individuals' experiences to that vision forward of who can best represent the things that I care about. Where do I trust that if I reach out, someone's going to listen and care about this, whether or not it's their experience, but they value and validate that this is true and real for me. And so I think we're seeing women stepping in strongly.
So it is so encouraging and wonderful to hear the movement that's happening. And certainly, as I spoke about, for me, Mayor Janice Laking was the kind of beginning picture in my mind about women in politics and in important decision-making roles. So you are the Ward 3 City Councillor. You are one of 2 women who sit at the table. And how do we encourage more women to be at that table?
Thank you for asking. I think part of it is starting and continuing the conversation. And so, I would say if you're interested, reach out to me. So this wasn't a plan. This was not a career path. I followed something I was passionate about. I am interested in making a difference in the city in which I live. These are things that matter to you, whether you run in the next campaign, which is coming up in 2022. If you've got questions about what that's like, reach out, because I think it's also about, getting more women to run. And then we also have better opportunities to get more women around the table. But we also have a very strong and interesting dynamic happening in the city where we're seeing a lot of female leadership positions. And so there's multiple ways in which to get involved as well. There are some great toolkits that I've actually been working through, and I'm going to actually start a pledge to all elected officials across Simcoe County that's asking anyone that is in the privileged position of being an elected official to ask her to actually reach out to women at any level, but to get them engaged, whether it's on a committee, whether it's in the next election, but get them involved in sharing their voice and making decisions that impact city living. And we know that through at least the research, we typically find that women need to be asked multiple times. And so it's about continuing the conversation, starting that now, and revisiting individuals and seeking out information and finding people that could mentor you. So there are really great resources. There are Facebook groups in Barrie that are popping up, that are forums for conversation. Toolkits are being developed. Panels and these conversations are happening to encourage women to run. Don't reconsider it. Don't hesitate. So often, we get in that, the time that it takes to analyze whether or not we're ready. Just start the conversation. See where it goes, see what excites you about it. And whether or not it's in 2022 or further down the line, open the doors and make those connections and networks. And also think about women you want to see running and reach out to them. So help to support, letting a woman know that you think that she could, do a good job and that you see her in the seat. There's much more diversity needed and representation needed. Even being one of 2 women, we've got 10 wards representing the city and our mayor. So let's reach for broader representation, but also more diverse representation. Because I know I come with my own lived experiences. And so while, I'm going to do my best for any resident in my ward and for the best interest of the people that live in the city of Barrie, I know that I probably don't relate to all women. And so let's have a more diverse, focused, broader thinking, viewing, experienced council.
I just want to thank you so much, because I think that you've offered a lot of great information to women who might just be thinking, you know what, I feel like I could really have some input. I could really use my voice, but just not knowing, where do I start, right? And I love hearing the mentorship and the guidance that can happen for other women to encourage them to be at the table. And, becoming involved in municipal politics, any layer of politics, for women in particular, is a stream of building gender equality. And I just wanted to ask you, if you thought about, in your own mind, all the different ways that we would say we've reached it, what would that look like for you? How would you describe that to say we're there?
Wow. I guess my goal will be to see where I can drive and support, 50% representation in the next city council, whether it's me or another woman in, the Ward 3 seat, but where we can see equal representation, where we can also see representation of women on our city committees. Mm-hmm. And so let's look at how we invite people to the table, how we are clear about what's expected, how much time, what the mandate is, what we're asking you to do, and help people to also align that when they're going to spend their time and get invested in this, they know what they can impact. They know that this is something that they will find satisfying and joy from, and that they're able to reach the right table that they want to see change at. So I think it's broad strokes, and we're already seeing great leadership at the city level with city staff and that are women in leadership positions.
And I know, even kind of moving off of politics in particular, when we think about gender equality, I know that there are some initiatives that are happening through and with the city and community partners right now. Like, I think of community safety as an example, in particular for women. And so what will your thoughts be about that?
Around community safety and well-being, I think it's also making sure that we're hearing the experiences of women around how we shape policy in the city. And so there's been some fabulous work happening. And I saw recently the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. We've done audits around the downtown safety with individuals that have taken this on as their mission. We've seen the community reach out in a petition and talk a bit about what it's like to be a woman walking in the downtown. We need to shift that report around the city of Barrie not being one of the safest places to live. And so making sure women are a part of those change efforts and are actually informing how we move that bar, I think is important, to make sure that we are putting some of the decision making in their hands, and we are making sure it's not sitting at a political table, it's not sitting in a closed door conversation, that we get better at transparency and inclusion into the conversation, where the voices of women from different experiences happen. And, they're even from the health system. Patient advisory councils and tables are a big movement over the past couple of years. We're seeing that now in other tables. We've got the anti-racism task force happening, and we've got different agencies that have their own lived experience voices that are basically saying, this is what we need around services. This is what we need around programming. So I think we need to get away from any type of decision-making that doesn't include being absolutely part of first empowering individuals to be part of the decision-making process. And I think making sure women have that role and are invited to the table so they're aware that those opportunities exist is a good starting point.
And I think, we hear this said many, many times, nothing about me without me. And I think that really is encompassing the words that you've just said. And yes, women with lived experience, but we think about anyone who may have mental health challenges, someone who is actively using substances, that our community needs to create policies, programs, services, and be a community that speaks to what those folks want for themselves, want and need for themselves. And I love that you are encouraging women and all citizens to come to the table, to use their voice. And I think, Ann-Marie, if I can offer you this feedback, you create a space and an environment for people to feel that they can be open and come to a place of trust to be able to share that. And I think that that's a space that you create for us in the community. So I want to thank you and offer you that feedback and just how important that is, that you are encouraging all of us to come to the table and see if we can be a part. And so I want to thank you for being with us today. It has been a great conversation, very inspiring and encouraging. And we want to thank our valued community for also coming along this journey with us, engaging in these conversations. We do aim to educate, inform, and challenge our thinking. Please come back and join us again. We welcome the dialogue, and we hope that you all take care.